Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. And today we are going to be continuing this podcast. I just want to say I am aware, I think I have more introverts on my channel. So a lot of you guys find them really boring because they're more extroverted. I totally get it. So I think what I'm going to do is probably in prior episodes, I will continue to react to them, but I'm probably going to get certain segments where they actually talk about things, because that is one thing the Fab Fatties had that worked with in my channel and my branding is they were all introvert cringe. All of them were introverted. So we could all have an introvert kiki basically here on the channel. So I'm aware of that. I think from an introvert perspective, just to any of my extroverts that are watching, again, you're always welcome here. Love y'all. A lot of the talking is just noise to introverts, where it's a bunch of nothing and it can feel really boring. So I'm just aware of that. I'm just letting you guys know I'm aware. So there's a little bit of extrovert cringe in this podcast because it's a lot of noise. It's basically just noise a lot, where it's you're talking but you're not saying anything. So I'm just saying we're going to finish this whole episode, which is very long. It's almost 2 hours, so it's going to be a while. But then in the future, I'll probably just do certain segments because, I think it's a little bit of a branding mismatch for my channel. But also, introverts, we got to engage. So you're not going to be totally rid of them on the channel. I'm not either. We need to engage with extroverts too and understand, because this isn't just a one-sided issue. This affects both sides of that spectrum. My only other updates that are totally irrelevant is that I'm really enjoying Olivia's new album, Olivia Rodrigo, and Auntie is Proud. There's only a couple songs on the album where I'm ooh, I'm too old for this. That's My Way and Expectations. They're not bad songs, but I'm just too old. But then she made You Plus Me Equals Heart. She astroturf negative lyrics because she's trying to viciously take down her ex, like she always does. And because of that, she made that song that's probably a super cheesy girly pop song into a ontified, burned version. So it made it perfect. So she has something for the busted millennials too. So I'm proud of her. Proud of my introvert girly pop. And I just wanted to say that because I'm gay. So let's go ahead and continue now. That's enough announcements. I'm just going to jump in. I don't remember where I was or anything. So let's go.
That post about the French women having
their own
club in Paris because of how frowned upon it was to be a certain way. And for a while I thought that it was illegal to be, not illegal, but I thought that there was more of a defined system to stop people from being a certain size in France, and there was not. But in looking that up, it does say that in Japan there was a such thing as a Metabo law in 2008 requiring mandatory waistline checks for adults aged 40 to 74. And it kind of makes me think that not only just in American culture, but in a worldly culture, we are influenced to be a certain size to conform.
Okay, so American culture is going to be the most lax about weight. So the fact that they can even try to act like America is especially bad, or America is so judgmental or whatever on this issue, it is flat out delusional. You will not find anywhere else that is going to be not as basically as permissive as the US. The closest you can get, as I've told you guys, is probably Mexico and Canada. I don't know what's going on with North America, but it is what it is. That's probably your closest. Everywhere else in the world, basically, there's probably going to be some kind of issues. Now, there are certain cultures where being bigger is attractive, but that's not really the norm. It's not the global norm. So the global norm is people want people to be around the average weight for a human being, basically. And that's basically it. So anything that's not that is kind of an outlier. So there are certain areas like in East Asia where they want you to be extremely thin. And then there's certain areas, I believe in Africa, where they want you to be chubbier. But it's not really the norm. I'll put it to you that way. It's just not. It's typically average. Most places want you to be average. And what I mean by average is genetic human genome average. So basically within a healthy range, like every other species in the entire world. So, it's that kind of thing. So when you're talking culturally, societally, politically, etc., I still think that the US is going to be probably the most permissive. You have the most access to being fat and the least judgment to being fat in the United States. So therefore, the US is the most pro-fat country in the entire world. So if it's not good enough for you here, it's probably not going to be good enough for you anywhere. Because where I believe anyways, correct me if I'm wrong, but the places where it is a little bit, it's seen as more attractive to be overweight, it's because it's difficult to be overweight in that country or in those countries, because access to food and stuff like that can be a little bit trickier. So it typically has associations with wealth and these kind of things. So there's like another layer to it. But again, you guys can let me know on that stuff. I don't know like all the specifics of everywhere in the entire world. But with the US, access to obesity and lackadaisical judgment, or basically hardly any judgment of obesity or even outright promotion, let's be real, the US is your place.
Like, it's not based off of anything else but conformity and control. And so I do think that, again,
physical reality is something it's based upon too. It's based upon what the human genome, like there's going to be certain limits on a human body, what a human body can take, and weight is definitely one of those things. It's the same thing with height too. Like if people get too tall or whatever, or even too short, it can be not as ideal for health reasons. Like there's a reason there's such a thing as an average. It's because that tends to be what lives the longest, what tends to reproduce the most, etc., etc., etc. So this is very biological, basic stuff. I'm not saying anything radical or different or new or anything. I'm just saying that average exists for a reason, and weight is definitely a part of that. Now, where weight is different is that it can change drastically throughout life in ways that other things cannot. And weight is also contributed to mostly by our own action. Mostly. So what I mean by that is even if there is some hormonal issues, it's probably going to be, a 10 to 15 pound difference. It's not something that's like 100 or 150. They stretch that way beyond any level. And then any genetic differences of bone shape or size or all that kind of stuff, it's still not going to be like 100 pounds. Like it is just ridiculous. And even within obesity, it's not really appropriate to be obese. So you can't really justify it. I'm just saying you can't. So that's that. But yeah, and you see it through health outcomes and this kind of stuff. Like, so that has nothing to do with conformity. That has to do more so with physical reality and the practical limitations of what the human body can do, basically, which there are going to be some limitations of a human body. Just like if you fall from a very high place, you may not survive. You probably won't, because there's certain limits of the amount of force the human body can take. And I hate that I have to talk like this, but when people are within E fall by the letter D, they forget all these details. They lose touch with reality. This is what I'm talking about. Like, it's like you don't think about like the force at all, or you don't think about the force on your knees, or like how you can't breathe if you're laying down at a certain size. Like you don't think about these very physical things. And so I have to bring it up, not to be like patronizing, but because they're not considering it legitimately. They're not. So yeah. And people are like, what? And it's like, yeah, because that's the mental illness aspect. It's delusional. You fragment certain parts of reality out of your brain.
You must be of a sheep mindset if you give a fuck about what my body is doing to that extent. Like I don't know, because even when I see a hyper small person, I'm not automatically like, we got to get you some food.
No,
You know what
we
I'm saying? Or,
know.
you
You
know,
guys justify all of it. You justify the underside too. You justify the reductive. And Anna, we know. I see it all the time with Ariana Grande. We are well aware of the DIS ordered roots of your movement and how it goes both ways. Of course. Of course.
not, yeah, like that's
You
just
got scurvy, bitch.
not where my mind goes, because it's socially
Yeah.
acceptable to be smaller,
Yeah.
and that is the goal. But like we don't get that same grace because it's almost like you're fearful that the our overrulers are going to kill me first because I'm fat. Like that's what it gives. It's like you're fearful, almost in like the Hunger Games when they're scared of like the people coming to like, like it's like you're
Yeah.
scared of me like getting all of this like super aggressive consequences for my size when really you're just uncomfortable. Nothing's gonna happen. I'll be fine. I'll live a happy life.
Yeah.
But the optics fail because you're complaining during this whole podcast and you're talking about how you have to survive society because you're fat. So you have to pick one. You can go for the toxic positivity lane, or you can go for the negative, everything sucks and I hate being fat. You can't really do both though. You can't. Or if you do both, I somewhat do, like when I've talked about downsizing and things like that, and I've talked about the journey in different aspects, but it tends to end up being kind of mid. Because if you have good and bad in something, then it's just kind of mid and boring and it's just whatever. It's like that kind of thing. So I tend to not over dramatize body size issues because I think it's really astroturfed and fake, and it's like Olivia Rodrigo putting negative lyrics into a love song just because she can't stand her ex. That's basically what it's like, which I get it. Trust me, I get the toxic ritualistic drive to make something more dramatic than it is. It's a huge part of it. I literally have the mid-sized princess. I still have the wig here and stuff. I literally talked about that aspect where you go into the dramatics because you're trying to hold on to a problem that no longer exists. And I think I'm going to cover somebody this week that definitely has that energy. But regardless, it tends to be kind of mid. It's what you make of it, blah, blah, blah. Now, what isn't mid and what isn't what you make of it is your health. If your health is bad because of your size, it doesn't matter how people view you. You have to deal with that every single day, every second of every day, especially at your size, especially at both of their size. They're having physical consequences every single day. You cannot lie to me. You're not going to get me to believe it. I do not give a fuck what you say. Reality is going to hit you. It still does. And it's not always like a sudden bad event, although it does tend to get there the further you go, the longer you go. Which again, I don't say it with any joy, but I do think we're going to see something with Ariana, more than likely, at some point. Because again, the human body has limitations. So yeah, those physical aspects, they don't go away. Now, when you weight normalize, then it goes away. You'd be amazed at how much you can recover. You'd be amazed at how physical issues surrounding weight become so background to your life that you have to create drama around it in order to still think about it. Like, I don't really do that anymore. That's been a part of my challenge in this vanity era of mine, and a part of my challenge going into maintenance and, kind of shifting goals and lifestyle and all that stuff. It's been a huge challenge to not over dramatize it. And I've done my best not to. And I've talked a lot more about spiritual work that has to be done and things that have to change internally that have nothing to do with weight. I've been facing other issues. I've been facing attachment style issues and dynamics. I've been facing, again, like my own ability to find pleasure in life, you know, outside of the toxic ritualistic. Like I'm going real deep into some hardcore long-term aspects of no longer being in the zombie horde or no longer having an E fall by letter D, where it's like, okay, now I'm finding ways to find pleasure again outside of it, which I'm going to do a video about. Here's a preview. Pleasure, the feeling of pleasure comes from the body. So you have to be integrated into your body in order to feel pleasure and fun. Otherwise, you can't. If you're like disconnected, you can't do it. And a lot of times people cut themselves off from their body, and the only time that they're engaging with their body, particularly within binge, is when they are bingeing. So that's like the only time they allow themselves to be physical. And that's a very bad thing. So I'm going to talk about some of the spiritual aspects of that pretty soon, because this is a huge part of recovery, is like not doing that, you know? So anyways, I'm just saying, and sometimes people, that disconnect can get worse when they weight normalize. So you have to like reintegrate after, which is what I'm doing. So anyways, I'm just saying, like, it's a lot, but it's not impossible, and they're being over dramatic about it. It's like if they were talking about the physical health issues, even if they're talking about barriers to weight normalization, if they're talking about like even social barriers to weight normalization, that would be more productive than talking about how society just hates me because I'm fat. It's not productive.
I'll be happy. I'll like have love, all the things just like anyone else. It's not going to affect anything that deeply, but you've been trained to think so.
Yeah.
And that's not for me to internalize.
And what you think about is what manifests.
No, see, they're overly mystifying it. And you have to, because, which again, that's one of those spiritual arguments used to justify the TR. I told you guys they would do that. I was telling my spiritual girlies and boilies, you're going to see a lot more of that kind of conversation now. So whatever you think about, you manifest. You don't have to think about the health problems involved with your weight. They will happen regardless. So that's where we're losing touch there. However, something like what I said, like you need to physically integrate or psychologically and spiritually integrate with your body in order to feel pleasure. That is actually helpful spiritual advice. But you can see how it can be twisted. So if I don't think about what's happening to my body, then it's not happening. That's delusional. And that's using a spiritual belief to justify your behavior, which happens all the time in bingo. Replace the O with an E. So she just said it. I'm going to point it out every time you hear it. Every time I hear it, I'm going to tell you, oh, that's another spiritual argument. Oh, that's another one. That's another one. That's another one. You know, I'm going to tell you guys because it's happening. They're kind of shifting to that because I don't think the political stuff is working as well. So they're going to start changing it probably to spiritual talk, basically.
Damn.
Ew.
Like your life sucks.
It does.
Sorry. Damn. You're like, if you give a fuck that much about what anybody got going on, race.
So I never framed my life as sucking or not sucking, or I never was like, I do this healing because I want to be happy or I want pleasure. That was never the point. At this point in my life, it is becoming the point. I want to have more fun in life, and I feel like I've gotten past this struggle, and I want to move on, and I want to feel good, and, you know, I just have a different journey. I've been on a spiritual journey since August, and I'm reaching that point where it's time to find pleasure in life. And, you know, it's like I listened to the new Olivia Rodrigo album. I found so much pleasure in it. I love the sound of her voice. I loved it. I've been watching horror movies and stuff and getting into the back rooms and obsession discussion. I'm team obsession. I don't care. You know, I don't care who that upsets. I'm team obsession 1,000%. But it's funny to see all the commentary and the discourse about it, and it's like, I find pleasure in horror movies. You know, I'm going to see that weird alien one pretty soon. So it's like, I find pleasure going to the cinema, and it starts small, but it's like, that's, you kind of just frame your brain that way, and then you start looking for opportunities for more fun, you know? And for me, that's really balancing. For other people, maybe they need to get more serious. I understand that too. I had to get serious, obviously, when I had to like get out of the TR and all that. But it's like, I don't frame it, even if I'm finding pleasure in like horror movies and Olivia Rodrigo's music and stuff, that's not like I'm better than you, or I'm competing with you, or because I'm happy in this way, you have to be unhappy. I don't give a fuck. It's your life, you know? But when it comes to the issue of weight and stuff, I do give a fuck, because you're not just keeping it to yourself. You're sharing it with other people, and you're promoting it in other people. So it's a whole other level, for one. And for two, you are delusional. You're not really making a clear decision. I mean, you are to stick with it, but you're sticking with it based on a delusional belief that if you don't think about what's happening to your body, it's not happening. That is delusional. Like, straight up delusion. And I'm going to call it out. You know, I'm an activist. I do it for a living. This is my job. So, yeah, is a job hard sometimes? Yeah, it is. But that's every job. That's the gig. Every job has hard parts to it. So if I get on here and I sound negative and I sound like I'm yelling all the time, it's like, or I'm bitching all the time, it's because I'm an activist. That's what the job is. You know, but in my personal life, no, not really. Not really. My biggest complaint is just that I get up early and I don't know why. But I mean, whatever, right?
Size, ethnicity, immigration status, sexual orientation, what they refer to themselves.
Fatness has nothing to do with any of that. So I don't know, like, the forced connection between the two, or between like the forced integration of fatness into any of these other conversations when they're all totally different conversations is bizarre. It's just bizarre. It really is.
As he, she, shim, they, you don't have enough going on in your life, and you kind of fucking suck. You suck if you care about any of that.
It also gives house nigga though, like for real. It gives like, you know what I mean? Like no shade to I hate that narrative, and I hate that I just even perpetuated that myself. But do you know what I mean? Like it gives like clan, like
Coons be cooning.
It gives clan like fuck though. Like it
You
gives
clan?
like yo. It really does give that
the
you.
coons be
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm going to let you guys comment on that.
cooning. That shit. They needed coons. They needed coons on the plantation in order to keep things orderly.
That's what I'm saying. Like
coons.
it gives like you trying to make sure that we all fit into the idea of this white ass
They need y'all
patriarchy.
motherfuckers with that low racial self-esteem. They need y'all.
Yeah.
That shit is sad. Y'all make the world work. Y'all make this. They make white supremacy run as just as much as white people that also perpetuate that shit.
And I think they're watchful comment.
So I think this is the logical conclusion of stating that being of a normalized weight is white supremacy. That is going to lead to these kinds of takes. That's going to lead to this type of worldview. And I think it's really, I'll just say this, I think it's negative. And I think it's a lot of toxic ritualistic reinforcement directly, specifically targeted towards Black people, basically. Which this happens often with women too. For some reason, there is a lot of investment in Black people being obese and women being obese. I don't really understand it. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I think that perhaps the super focus and attention and super targeted reinforcement, they are examples of actual like social oppression directed towards those groups. I'll put it to you that way. Or, you know, cultural oppression, that kind of thing, where it's like it's being so heavily enforced on those two groups, like women and black people, to the point where there probably is some racism and misogyny behind it, because it is a little bit disproportionate, in my opinion, where it's like, whoa, you know, like, how dare you kind of thing, you know. It's like, whoa. So there's something to that. I don't know. I don't have all the answers as to why that happens, but I just think that it's really sad, and I'm totally against it, and it sucks. I think it's shitty.
Is literally, like I said, just them trying to push that white ass narrative.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
But okay, so with that being said, how do you feel, and has it ever been obvious that you were the fat friend, or even like the only fat person in the group? You know what, too, I'm curious, like, in those situations, if that is something that's relatable to you, do you find yourself like shrinking or being more confident in those situations?
Being the only fat person in the room? No, I think I do find myself not shrinking, but it's the same thing. Well, I guess it depends. It depends on the situation, because, again, I don't have a lot of skinny friends, but with, let's say, Chiffon, she is not a plus-size girl, but she's also not, like, a thick, skinny person. I don't feel my size isn't a thought when I'm with my friend at all. But when I was in SD school, and I would be with the group of girls that I went to SD school, there was not that safety. We don't got 16 years of friendship. I'm not feeling that safe around y'all. And also, like, I remember, like, being somewhere, and I was in the car with the girls that I was closest to in this group, and they were critiquing themselves and talking about their body, both much smaller than me. And I remember turning around and being like, so if y'all feel this way about yourselves, what y'all think about me? And then kind of being like, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like real life, like, what you guys are saying this about yourselves and your bodies. How do you feel about me? Why am I like, no, like, that shit being
like, don't talk about yourself like that.
She might be severe too. They might both be, because I feel like if you hear somebody say something about their body and you immediately think that they're talking about yours, it's kind of stage 3 zombie, you know. It's clicker. It's not quite stalker, it's clicker. Like, that's severe. That's a severe problem. It means you're, like, it means you're blind, right? You're losing that empathy, like the zombies are, where the cordyceps blocks their eyes. But it's also like you're way overly identifying with being fat, to where if somebody criticizes fatness, they're criticizing you. That's not real. That's not an actual connection. And it's DIS ordered, basically. It really is.
Also, like, yeah.
Being the only fat person in the room, I feel like, is even worse, though, because at least it's like, you know that these people know at least parts of your personality. They know you. Being the only fat person in the room is like, you feel like the center of attention.
I literally feel like my weight, like, expands.
See. And this gives, like, why they push for the normalization of obesity, because although they still want to be bigger than the average person, class 1 obesity, it makes it less of a gap. So it's less anxiety inducing. And then class 1 obesity can also reinforce the reductive too. So that's why they push for that, which, again, we've reached that point in the US. Like, they have succeeded. I've told you guys, though, the zombie horde, they want this everywhere in the world. So they're not going to stop here. But that's why, because the comparison is too stark. If everybody around you is totally thin, human genome average weight, it's too big of a gap if you're super morbidly obese around them. And then you feel like alienated or unable to relate, which I had those feelings, like I couldn't relate to people when I was super morbidly obese, because you almost don't even feel human anymore at that size. And part of, like, my tortured morbid obesity experience was that I was feeling really human again, and it felt weird. But again, that's something a lot of people are not going to understand. But it is something that I think they would probably go through.
Double the size when I'm the only fat person in the room. I feel like it reeks of fat bitch. You know what I mean?
going to Ireland, like, I was conscious about a couple things. One, I'm American. I'm American. And I am
Yeah.
black, clearly. And I am fat. So there was a few things going. I don't think my race, I didn't really think about it when I was there.
Yeah.
First, hopped off the plane.
Yeah, there's a lot
Hopped
more
off
than
the plane,
people.
got in the taxi. My
Yeah.
taxi driver was black.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that about Europe. In the
Yeah,
first
no.
place. Yeah.
Like, I would say that Dublin is like the New York City. It is so diverse.
Yeah.
It is so, and it's also the hub into Europe. People have to, if you're traveling, most people have a layover. They're going through Dublin Airport to get elsewhere into Europe. But yeah, very diverse. Belfast, which is Northern Ireland, which is technically part of the UK, even though it's on the island of Ireland, vastly different experience. Like, I was getting made fun of because I was black, because I was fat, and it was like in my face. It was very apparent on the train up there. It was a very different experience compared to Dublin. I went to the Game of Thrones studio tour, so I was in Dublin, and I had to take a tour bus back up to Northern Ireland to go see the studio where scenes of Game of Thrones were filmed. And I remember being aware and self-conscious that I'm the biggest person on the bus, because I think that was the most important thing there, was my size. I didn't really think about me being American. I had so many fucking dates with guys I wasn't really giving about. I didn't think about me being American. I didn't think about any of that, but my size. I remember being on that bus and seeing a...
Yeah, I could see especially the size aspect. Like, I'm sure, like, I have no idea about the racial part of it. I've never been to Europe, so I have no idea about anything as far as that. I've never been there. When I've gone abroad, I've only been to Australia and New Zealand, which, that was crazy. But it was a crazy experience. But I didn't have any issues, which is a bad thing. Because I should have, because I was huge. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I didn't have any, like, fat phobic issues, really. There was some, like, American hate, though, in Melbourne. There was some American hate. Like, this one guy was, like, he could tell, because I was, like, on a college trip with a bunch of Americans, obviously, and we were all really young. That was back when Auntie wasn't Auntie. That was back when I was Olivia Rodrigo's age. And this guy was such an asshole, and he, like, put his arms out and, like, tackled through the group of us. I guess that was his little, like, I'm gonna stick it to the Americans moment. But that was it, and that was just in Melbourne, which I don't know if Melbourne has, like, the best reputation in Australia. But yeah, I was fine with Melbourne. Other than that, it was just weird, but that was the only place that was super rude. The other place where it was just bizarre to me was Cairns. They pronounce it Cairns, I think, basically. We would pronounce it Cairns, but it's where I went to the Great Barrier Reef. That area was just really weird, and I think it was just that Providence, or I think it's a Providence or state. I don't remember what Australia calls it. Sorry. But that place is kind of like the Florida of Australia. It's just weird. I think it's Queensland. It's just weird. So that was weird. But everywhere else, I didn't have an issue. And I went, like, all around the east coast of Australia. And then New Zealand was fine. I didn't have, like, there was no issues in New Zealand at all. But I think New Zealanders or Kiwis are just very chill. So it was just very chill and naturalistic. Yeah. I'm, like, going to be paranoid now that I got Queensland wrong. But I think I'm right. I don't know. Now I'm freaked out. But I know Melbourne's in Victoria, so I know that. And I know New South Wales, so at least I know that. I tried. But it was amazing. It was crazy. I was really fat. I definitely felt really fat, but I was mostly bothered by the physicality of it, because it was a lot of, like, 3 a.m. flights, and people were going out partying at night, and I was like, fuck that. Like, I have to choose days or nights. I cannot do both. So I stayed in the room, basically, and I was boring because I was exhausted. And then I got really sick on the trip, and I literally missed Bondi Beach because I had to go to the doctor, and that was on my birthday, which was gross. So that was horrible. But anyways, yeah, that's all I got. So I've never been to Europe, so I can't speak on it at all. Literally at all. Like, I've never been. But I'm sure the fatness issue would be an issue. That's all I can say. That's what I'm pretty educated on, and I would say, yeah, I think so.
A bigger, like a bigger woman walk on the bus, and I immediately was like,
Thank God.
I'm not the only one here. You
Yeah.
can't just fixate all your attention on me.
Yeah.
In my body. I did not speak to this woman. I did not. I just felt.
No, but
I
it's
just felt
that's
like
what you
I
see
see.
me. Yeah.
I felt not alone. Even I never.
Yeah, it's not very reinforcing if there's nobody else around that's big. So I think that's part of why they want big people around all the time, because it reinforces you. So she's actually covering that really well, of why it's so reinforcing to have people be bigger around you.
A word with this bitch, and I was just like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it's crazy that you have to find like that solidarity. I know that works amongst black people in certain situations.
But you know what? Even being the only like fat person in a room with black people is uncomfortable
Oh, yeah.
too. Like, because
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
even like we're saying we're in a multicultural room, right? Even if I'm the only fat person, even though there's other black people there, like depending on the environment that I'm in, I still feel very othered. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, honestly, like black people could be super conservative too. They could be really close minded as well. They're not
A
excusing
lot of
that
black people are
conversation
conservative.
based off of
Yeah.
And so I relate to your sentiment of like, yeah, like I tend to look for the fat person in the room when I'm in those situations to kind of break the ice for myself to make me feel not so excluded.
Well, I think because of their DIS ordered mindsets, the weight is actually the biggest thing. It's the most important. And people don't understand that, but it is. So it will be above every single other thing. And people are like, that's not true. And I'm like, no, it is. Like, she's telling you that the weight is the biggest thing. That's what bothers her the most.
Yeah. It's also fat men don't count. I don't know what it is.
Because
see
they're
a
still
fat
men. Because they're still men, and I don't
Yes.
think we
Like,
look
I
at
need to
we
see
don't.
another
It's because you can't project yourself onto them as well. So it still has DIS ordered roots because you can't, like, it's I think it's the same thing for zombie men. They see themselves more in men. So it has to do with like it because it's so body focused, you can't see yourself as the same body as a fat man, as a woman. Like it just doesn't really work that way, unless if you're super huge. So if you're like 400 or 500 pounds, then probably. But it's because a lot of those differences kind of go away. But if it's just like, let's say you're both mid-size, you're a mid-sized man, you're a mid-sized woman, and you have issues, like you're fat but not fat, right? You're kind of in between. You're not going to see the other person as somebody you can identify with or project yourself upon. So therefore there's not as much empathy, especially at severe levels, which they're very severe. So they're like beyond mid-sized princess energy. They're like on a whole other level. So they have no empathy anyways. So if it's not a fat woman, then they can't see themselves in that person at all, because you have to remember it's body based. That's why. So it's still DIS ordered. Weight doesn't have a gender. Fatness doesn't have a gender. It's bullshit. And as far as like some people are more lax towards men, some people are more lax towards women, it's super individual. There isn't really like a correlation. And people would say that and they'd be like, no, of course it is, and da-da-da. Women have it worse, da-da-da. I think women's looks are looked at more, but that doesn't include just weight. That includes a lot of things. And weight is just like it's like in a pile of other things. And it's not, like there's a lot of circumstances where men are judged harsher for weight. And there will be a lot of especially fat women who can't stand fat men and, that kind of thing. It works the other way too. But that's the point. It's very individual. So it totally depends on the group that you're in, the context that you're in, the time that you're in and place, all of it. So I don't think that there is like a correlation of socially women have it harder being fat, men have it harder being fat. It doesn't exist. It's totally individual. It depends on the person. Some people are just more permissive towards one side and not the other. I just can't even. I think it's just a huge distraction from the issue. and it's just meant to keep us from actually talking about it. That's how I view it. But no, fatness is not gendered. It's not a gendered issue. And I mean, if you want to go purely based on physical reality, men die faster from it. So there's actually more of a physical disadvantage for men when it comes to obesity. However, with women, I always say the system falls apart slower, but it's harder to rebuild it. It's like it's slower to rebuild. So women's bodies are just kind of more slow. So it's like it takes longer to upsize, it takes longer to downsize. For men, it can go very fast either way. So that's basically the physical difference. Socially, like I said, it really depends on your context. And I don't play those games on this channel. I just don't.
Fat woman.
Although, going back to the auction block video that you had, a lot of the comments under there have been talking about like the combines and like the different ways in which we talk about men's bodies. So I don't want to say that they're not excused from this conversation at all. But I do want to bring light into the terms of like we don't sexualize men's bodies in the same way we do women. So
they don't have to be sexy. I mean, they don't like have to be.
It's like even if you don't have a weight issue as a woman, your looks will still be picked apart. So that's true. And that you have to separate, but people don't want to separate weight from looks because there's such a toxic ritualistic drive to combine those two things, but they're not actually all that related, honestly. They are to a certain extent, but it's just way over exaggerated. So it's like, it's one thing in a pile of things that your looks will be judged by. That's basically the facts. And if you can't see it that way, if weight is like the number one thing on the highest pedestal and that's all you can see, and you believe that weight is a woman's issue and all this stuff, you might be TR. Like, I'm going to tell you, you might be, because I guarantee you every thin woman still has the same pick apart looks thing. So it has nothing to do with weight. You're not going to escape that by downsizing. It just doesn't happen. So again, you're not looking at it realistically.
Especially men of color, especially black men, are looked upon, like the way we're viewing their bodies is a lot
different. Especially as a young woman. So I think it does shift a bit as women get older. But yeah, especially as a young woman, being of a normalized weight, you're not going to escape that scrutiny. You're just not. So it has nothing to do with it, to be honest.
Being a woman's body, period. So like when you're talking about being a fat black woman,
even though black men are highly hypersexualized,
they are for sure, but it's still not in the same ways that we are.
Yes.
So it kind of, I think for us walking into those rooms, that's why we don't find the security, because quite frankly, I've been othered by a fat person too that is a man. So it's easier, like there was that video, I think
happens all the
that
time,
you sent to the group chat or something, of this guy that was asking people, can fat girls be 10s?
Oh,
and there was a fat dude at the end that was like maybe an 8. He was fat as shit.
This nigga could barely breathe in the fucking microphone.
And he's talking about they could be an 8 or something, but that weight stops it from being a 10. It's like fat.
So some people that are in the TR, they still will judge the opposite sex as more, ugly or whatever for being fat. Like that can happen too. Like I said, it's hyper individualized. So you can be a fat man and judge fat women harsher and vice versa. That happens all the time. I just don't think it happens to such a universal effect that you can make like a cultural claim on it. It's just too individualized. So you just don't know what you're going to get. You do not know what you're going to get. I'm sorry, zombies, but you don't know who's going to judge you harsher or easier as a man or a woman. You just don't know. It's unpredictable. And that's just life. There are things in life that are unpredictable. And when it comes to this issue, that is something that is unpredictable. All I can tell you is, yes, people do view it differently based on gender. Yes, people do view it differently based on sex. Yes, people do view it differently based on these things. But at the end of the day, you have no idea what each individual person views it like. That's my take, For me personally, being so feminine but still being clearly male, I have a very mixed reaction. I get a lot of both, which is bizarre, but that's just my life. And I've accepted that. Obviously, like at this point, I'm auntie and I'm old now and I just don't give a fuck about it anymore. So I take what comes, basically. So for me, it's like a real hodgepodge of weirdness, but I take it as a blessing because it's helped me do this activism, because I can see it much more clearly than I think most. Because while I get a weird mixture, I also don't get the extremes of either side, you know? So I can kind of see it plainly, if that makes sense. It kind of just makes everything mid, because as much as I'm not a woman, I still get judged as a mean girl all the time. And if I'm ambitious at all, somebody wants to squash it down, and I'm a huge bitch and I'm this and I'm mean and whatever. And that sentiment of like, nobody likes to see a woman happy. I'm not a woman, but nobody likes to see me happy either. So it's like, I get some of the social things for sure. But obviously there are physical things that I don't get. So it's just a mix, basically. I get a very mixed reaction. But yeah, I have no idea how they would view me. I don't know. So it's even more unpredictable for me. But as Gracie Abrams says, that's my life, you know?
Fat men are not excused from also
And that nigga
othering
wasn't
fat
even
people.
cute.
No.
Dusty.
But going back to our conversation, in terms of like being in a fat friend group or like being in public and having to kind of like be comfortable in those spaces, I sometimes find myself really shrinking. Mm-hmm. And I'm not normally someone that does that, but I don't know if I said the story on the podcast I told you guys a story about when I went to High and Dry and that doctor made this joke. I don't think I told this. Yeah.
Yes.
Have I told this on the podcast?
I think so.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so if you guys have seen that episode beforehand where I was talking about being in public with friends, and this girl, her mom basically was like chastising me for ordering Brussels sprouts. It's like those are the situations where I'm like, I don't even think about being fat, but I'm being reminded that I'm fat in those moments. And I do have this sense of like, either I want to prove myself or I want to be quiet and like completely leave the room. Like there's no in between to that, because it's like, that's just not like, I'm literally just existing, and now I feel like I have to explain my existence to you because you don't understand how fat people work. And it's not your place to even understand how fat people work, but it's also not your place to criticize me without knowing me, especially over something as small as like ordering food or like wearing a certain outfit or going to a certain place. Like that's not, I don't think it's just not fair.
Let's transition to the next question, because I think this is because
I think it's hard because you feel so, like, a lot of people don't understand that the toxic ritualistic, it's often born out of a rebelliousness, which people don't really talk about. And so when people are nitpicked about these little things, it's kind of like fuel for the problem, because it's like, well, I'm going to rebel against you. It's that kind of thing. So it's not actually that helpful, but I think from my perspective, and what I would suggest is being more gray. So it's like, oh, yeah, maybe you could just try something else and maybe that would work easier, that kind of thing, rather than, you shouldn't do that. You see how it's different? So it's a little bit, there's an art to it if you're going to talk about it. I think just go softer and always frame it as the person's choice, because it is. So like, if you really believe that you can control what she's going to do, then you're delusional. So you have to like understand that, because if you try to force it, it tends to not work. But present it as options and always underline the agency of the person. It's like one of the first things that I would say to somebody is, well, maybe don't just buy some cheap crap at the store. Like, if you want a cake, then bake it yourself, because it frames it as you actually have more control over what you're doing if you make it yourself, which that person's more likely to do that, because we often try to force control out of decisions about that, and I don't think that's helpful. So I think like underlying that you are in control and underlining how you could have even better control over certain things if you did this instead, that would be more helpful. But by the same token, there are certain things that we do have to acknowledge we don't have control over. For example, we can't control how somebody views a fat man versus a fat woman. You can't control that. You see, so we have to like, those types of thought processes are really important, and we also can't control all the outcomes of life and relationships and all this kind of stuff. So it's like you have to put the control back to where it actually belongs and accept unpredictability in areas where things are unpredictable, if that makes any sense. Gosh. Okay, I think since they're going to switch questions here, I'm just going to go ahead and end it here for today. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you so much. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.